Today we're talking about something really interesting and at the same time very complicated. For many, many years now, our northern border was identifiable or was understood as a threat that was related to the Iranian people. And then with the Israeli army pushing away Hezbollah, followed by the coup d'etat that took place in Syria, al-Julani rising to power, things have changed dramatically in this region. And we're here today, we're trying to really break down all of this really complex idea into this vacuum power that was created by Iran departing, by the Russians departing, by Syria sort of falling into pieces almost overnight. Comes a new player, drumroll, Turkey. And to explain Turkey, which is this really complex issue we have, and I'm going to read this because it's important to get the accolades of an academic correctly. We have Dr. Eytan Cohen, Yanarocak or Jacques?
Yanarocak.
Yanarocak. I'll do better next time. He's both from the Moshe Dayan Center in the Tel Aviv University and the JISS, which is the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, good friends of ours that we've done a lot of content together with. You've been on the topic of Turkey for a lifetime, literally and figuratively speaking. And we're here to try to really break down this complex issue, which is Turkey and how they now relate to Israel. I'm interested to hear where this is going to go because it's been an anomaly and a riddle to me for many years now. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Before we get started, pause this video for just 1 second. And if you've lasted this long or come here, make sure you like, you share, and subscribe. There's a reason we do this. And make sure that you get to watch this video also the next time and the next one, and that other people on the interweb get to watch our content on a regular basis. Every time you press, it makes a difference. It helps the lords of the algorithm get this message out to other people. So pause the video, press like, share, and subscribe. And now we can get back to this fascinating interview. Hi, let's start from the end here.
Sure.
I've lived in Israel my entire life. Turkey in my lifetime has gone multiple times from being the best friend, the number one destination for holidays, our enemies, our friends again, and now once again our enemies. And now there's talk of Turkey being an actual adversary we might be fighting against in our own neighborhood. So from a perspective of someone who doesn't really understand how Turkey operates and what their mindset is, what are we missing about the Turkish government and people?
Okay, that's a very tough question. You summarized it very clearly. We are witnessing a very fluctuating situation. That the two countries have never declared any hostilities towards each other. And besides that, for a decade or two, we are witnessing endless, deteriorations in the relation crisis, normalization processes. So I think we should internalize that we have a new player. His name is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's an Islamist, but he's a very pragmatic guy. So whenever he feels the necessity to mend the fences with Jerusalem, he's doing it. And whenever he sees that he cannot live with the current situation in a deliberate manner, he is deteriorating the relations with this country. So October the 7th, in Erdogan's perspective, in the beginning, was a limited military confrontation. But when he understood that Israel is declaring a full-scale war with an objective of eradicating the Hamas terrorist organization, then he understood that his foreign policy is not sustainable vis-a-vis the state of Israel, and he made a huge U-turn, and he upgraded Turkey's traditional pro-Palestinian foreign policy to pro-Hamas foreign policy, which is something very, we can say, unprecedented in Turkey's terms.
So I'm thinking back. We follow the news here on a regular basis, and at the same time, I look back at recent months and as it relates to Turkey, and I feel like I personally have a deep, fundamental misunderstanding of how they operate. Just to give an example of that, we're looking in at our immediate neighbors. We have Syria that's been destabilized. Lebanon has been destabilized. Hezbollah partially removed from the country. Jordan is a country teetering sort of on the brink of or bankruptcy or revolution or both at the same time. Egypt has its own problems. Everything is fragile. And suddenly into the mix and the vacuum that was created in part by the civil war in, or the coup d'etat in Syria, we suddenly are finding the Turks once again involved in matters that are on the fence of our country, to the point where we're talking about military presence, Turkish military presence in Syria, Turkish military involvement in what's happening in Syria. And to me, I feel like I missed a piece in the middle. What are they doing here? And how did we get to the point where this is the discussion?
Well, they are asking the same question for us, because from their perspective, they are the true owners of the Middle East. I would like to provide you a historical perspective.
In what, in the sense of the empire?
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
The Turks conquered the entire Middle East in 1516. This Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, land of Israel, Jordan, Egypt. Let me say it was 1517. But all of this region was conquered by the Ottoman Turks and remained under Turkish sovereignty for 402 years. What brought the end, the Turkish sovereignty here? Of course, we all know. First, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, then the consequences of the First World War, San Remo, mandate regimes, and of course the birth of the new nation states in the Middle East. We all know, and the rest is history. So from their perspective, they are making a historical comeback, and they are trying to restore the Middle East to its factory settings. And from their perspective, they are the ultimate producers. So they are the ones, they see themselves as the owners of that factory. So this is our main problem. During the whole civil war, they did support the Syrian opposition, and they provided them logistics, they provided them political assistance, everything they needed. And at the end, they also seized this opportunity, the war in Ukraine and the war in Israel, Lebanon. Thanks to the IDF, we could see the ultimate defeat of the Hezbollah terrorist organization, so that they could not send reinforcements against Al-Julani. So, long story short, all the stars aligned. Thanks to the war in Ukraine and Lebanon, Turkey seized the opportunity. Al-Julani, pressed the button and did this very impressive offensive against Assad. Assad flew, and now we have a new Syria, and now the Turks are saying, we invested here for years, so it is the time to take what we invested, okay? So therefore, we can say that Turkey is filling the vacuum that was, that appeared, Russia was there. Iran was there.
So
both of the countries,
Russia and Iran declining, results in Israel and Turkey gaining more power.
Indeed.
And then suddenly our adversary on the border now is Turkish-backed militias.
Indeed.
And then possibly, and I'm trying to understand,
military base even.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand is, are we looking at a situation, and maybe we're misunderstanding the whole conversation, where the Turks are looking at us as an enemy they want to fight against? Or are we misinterpreting their actions, and what they're looking for is a stake in a place that they want to make sure doesn't fall into someone else's hands?
Okay. Again, unfortunately, this is a very tough question. I wish if it was not a tough one and I could answer this in a very simple manner, but actually before October the 7th, I could categorize Israel in Turkey as a friendly country. Okay? But after October the 7th especially, Israel was categorized as Turkey's national security threat for Turkey. Okay, this is again very unfortunate, but it is the reality. In their opinion, Israel launched this war to implement its so-called historical vision. Okay, I think this is very ridiculous, but I still have to elaborate it for you. In their opinion,
is this
Israel
internal dialogue for the Turks, or is this what they're talking to their people about?
This is the official Turkish narration of how they see the things and how they are also shaping their national security policy. Okay, and this is unfortunately very crucial. That's why these are all based on conspiracy theories. What I'm going to say, that in their opinion, Israel launched this war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. After the Gaza Strip, Israel wanted to expand its territories inside Lebanon and then Syria. And if it's not enough for you, in their opinion, Israel had an intention also to acquire land in southeast Turkey. And that's how, in their eyes, Israel would realize its vision of greater Israel, or the promised land ideal, as Erdogan says. From Israeli perspective, as a person who is living here, I mean, that's really ridiculous. But still, we cannot laugh and pretend nothing was spoken there, nothing was said there. We have to adjust our policies accordingly. First of all, we need to clarify to the other side that we have no intention in controlling Lebanon, Syria, or parts of Turkey. We are now, unfortunately, traumatized because of the harsh consequences of October the 7th. And therefore, in order to acquire strategically defensible positions, we have no choice but other than grabbing these territories inside the Syrian territory until the new Syrian government will recognize the state of Israel. This is the sad truth. We do not have any intention to annex those territories, to put our flag just in the name of expanding our territories. Unfortunately, October the 7th showed us that we cannot pretend that our enemies are not planning to kill us. Therefore, we have to rise first and act first. And therefore, Israel also is changing its national security doctrine after October the 7th. And these are the, consequences. These are the side effects of our actions as well. So when we are looking from Turkey, the Turks, as I said, were concerned that Israel was approaching to them. But in reality, who approached to who? The Turks are approaching us towards the state of Israel. And now they are talking out loud that they have intentions of forming new army bases in Syria's Palmyra area, which was bombed a few days ago by the Israeli air forces. I think that was a kind of sort of a message also to the Turks that we do not want any military presence inside Syria. Before coming here, I heard the news in Turkish. They were talking about that the decision about integrating a new army base was still not taken, and if it will be taken, it would only for training the new Syrian army. Whether you're gonna buy it or not, I'm not really buying it, but still, they still did not declare their intentions in an official way. But the Israeli foreign minister made it very clear that we have no intention of turning Turkey into an active enemy. This is against the national security interests of the state of Israel. We unfortunately have enough enemies, and we have no intention to add Turkey to that long list. We prefer to have proper relations with Turkey and to minimize this friction in Syria. And therefore, we have to respect each other, and we have to open here a dialogue channel to minimize this
I have a problem.
This conflict.
I have a problem with the last sentence, in the sense that you're using two different vocabularies. Not you. You're repeating what other people said. The Israeli foreign ministry and the Israeli government, it speaks in, let's call it, diplomatic language. What you're just saying is like, yeah, I hear that if it was a press release from the Israeli foreign ministry, prime minister's office, that's the verbiage of that. The Turkish government is speaking a completely different language. It's an internal dialogue, similar to what happens in every single country, an internal dialogue that is addressed at its own audience, that is, if I'm summarizing some of the things you said in the last couple minutes, some of it is conspiracy theory, some of it is, and I'll get to this later on, is addressing internal conspiracy theories that incite to whatever emotions it is that lead to support of the government and their agenda. And the third part is feeding into President Erdogan's, let's call it illusions of grandeur and a desire to go back to a season that was called an empire that's far gone, the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
Now, all of that combined, I think in the end we're trying to understand the reality today on the ground. Today on the ground, I'm looking north, and I ask myself the question: in X amount of months, are we going to be seeing Turkish soldiers on the border with Israel, Turkish jet fighters flying in the Syrian airspace? Or is this sort of the last move for the Turks, which is we want to stabilize a fragmented and destabilized region, and to do that we need to move our forces a little forward? I'm trying to understand what is their end game, practically speaking. I understand we'll get to like the ideology and the philosophy of all of that. Practically speaking, is this a new enemy that we're going to be fighting in the Middle East? Or are they sort of responding to a threat that they imagine in destabilization, in the power vacuum of the Iranians, Hezbollah, the Russians that have departed? What is their real like move here?
First of all, let's categorize Turkey as an adversary, okay? As an opponent, let me say. Opponent is much more better here instead of adversary.
Opponent of Israel or everyone?
Opponent of Israel, okay? Turkey should be categorized as an opponent of the state of Israel. But I don't think that their number one intention in penetrating in Syria is to confront Israel. Their number one agenda is the Kurdish question. In northeast of Syria, throughout the border, we have Kurdish communities.
Yeah.
They are united under the umbrella of an organization called PYD-YPG. And in order not to be tagged as a terrorist organization by the international community, they also use the name Syrian Democratic Forces. Recently, this SDF, the initials, SDF, they signed a new agreement with the United States government that they would be integrated into new Syrian government. So this new Syrian government is backed by Turkey, needless to say. So from their perspective, they are trying to solve this Kurdish question in Syria by assimilating the Kurds into the Syrian state apparatus. Okay, so this is their number one concern, that there should be no autonomy, no Kurdish autonomy, no Kurdish flag, no armed Kurdish warriors or terrorists, right, as they say in Turkey, right, throughout the border. This is their number one thing.
Yeah,
the second issue...
Let's just delay on this for a second, because
Sure.
people might not know how complex the story of the Kurds is in this region.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say this in a nutshell.
Okay.
We visited, our team, we've been to Iraqi Kurdistan. The Iraqis have been fighting the Kurds under Saddam Hussein at the time, committed a genocide against them. The Turks have been fighting against the Kurds. And when I say fighting, I mean they've been fighting in the sense of war. And it's a minority that is in the size of a country, not a minority that's the size of a village. Tens of millions of people that are split across multiple borders. The Turks are terrified of them when it comes to their desire to reach an autonomy. They've been fighting them on an ongoing basis in
1984.
Pretty much since I've been born. For generations, they've been fighting against them. And almost every time they move in the Middle East, and not only them, the Iraqis too, and several other countries sort of have a stake in this. Iran
also
too has
Iranians.
the Iranians also have an issue with the Kurds.
Arabs, Turks, and Persians.
They all look at this
Iranians.
minority that's tens of millions of people.
Indeed.
And they always respond in fear to it. So I'm just emphasizing what you're saying. It's this prism of we're afraid of an enormous minority that's trying to create another country in our backyard. And everything we do is going to be directed at preventing that. Because the last thing we need is another strong, and the Kurds, they're not a pushover. They're a fighting nation that's been fighting for over 100 years in this region.
They are a landlocked entity. This is their main problem. And they're the most important misfortune of the Kurds, that they do not have this Mediterranean Sea.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, because think about it. Israel could succeed thanks to the Mediterranean Sea, that we had this oxygen towards the West, towards the Europe, from our perspective, to the civilized world. But when you're looking from the Kurdish point of view, from Kurdistan, when you're looking for instance, in northern Iraq, on your north you have Turkey, on your west you have Syrian Arabs, on your east you have Iran, and on your south you have again Iraqi Arabs. So you are dependent in today's terms, of course, to these four entities, two Arab, one Persian, and one Turkish. And therefore, they cannot declare in a unilateral manner their independence. This is a crucial problem. And also, they do not have a unity within themselves. The Iraqi Kurds and Syrian Kurds and Iranian Kurds and Turkish Kurds are not united at all. So that's a huge one. That's another story. Let us not go into deep.
I wanted to emphasize, 'cause you say this, you make the statement of like, look, the U.S. makes a power move, and they sort of they give some guarantees to the Kurds within Syria proper, and then the Turks.
It means that they are going to withdraw. You know that, right?
Yeah, it'll always. And
that's again, a problem again for U.S.'s reliability.
It's a repeated story in this part of the world. The foreign entities, they create a mess. And they get involved, and then they leave eventually because they don't have any physical stake. The Turks are next door.
Yes.
And they look at this and they say, well, this is an issue to us because autonomy here for the Kurds or power here for the Kurds is something that affects our Kurds within our country.
Precisely.
We're going to act accordingly because we want to make sure this problem doesn't increase.
Precisely.
So I cut you off. I just wanted to make a point of,
sure,
you need to understand how tense and tenuous the relationships are and how much the empires or the powers that be are afraid of ethnic minorities and religious minorities getting power, because once you start, you end with both the Arab Spring and the toppling of like the empires in this region, both in ancient times and in modern times.
I agree with you 100%. And when we are looking at this big picture, we can say that Turkey is telling itself, okay, first I'll deal with the Kurdish question, but second, I would like to, restore the Ottoman Empire's influence in the whole region, because they invested here, also money, efforts, logistics, time, whatever you can count, right? So from their perspective, if they are not going to fill this vacuum, another country will come there and will station there, and their influence will be diminished. Therefore,
they're 100% in claiming that, though.
Yeah, but now, of course,
not even far history. I think they've had multiple lessons throughout history that tell them that that's a good idea. Because once when they were falling apart as an empire in the 19th century, and you had foreign empires start carving out pieces of them while they were still alive, and then repeatedly you look at what happened now. Go 10 years back. You have the Russians during the Syrian civil war. The Russians just built bases within Syria proper, close to the border with the Turks, and they're already affiliated to them and concerned about them. It makes sense.
But from the Turkish perspective, I would like to make a distinction between Turkey and Russia.
Okay.
Russia approached to Syria in a pragmatic way. They wanted to exploit the sources, the strategic position of Syria for their own interests.
You're talking about what? A warm water port?
Himeyim and Tartus. Yeah. As you say, warm water port. Indeed, throughout the history, we all witnessed that the Russians did everything in order to get to the Mediterranean. Their all campaign against the Ottoman Empire in the Black Sea area was
their blockade on the Bosphorus and Dardanelles.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so when we are looking from the historical perspective, the Turks are not looking at Syria as a satellite state. They look at Syria
as an extension of
as their own territory that was taken from them. I would like to now quote Mr. Erdogan. He said, if the First World War did end in a different direction with different consequences, then we could tag all of these provinces, Aleppo, Idlib, Damascus. All of them belong to today's Turkey. That's what he said. Okay, so you can understand the mindset of this politician, of this statesman, that when he's looking at Syria, he is not seeing another sovereign state, another equal state next to Turkey, another neighboring state, but he is seeing an Ottoman province, and he sees El-Julani as his governor.
So I want to zoom out for a minute. I'm trying to remember the name of the book, but the premise of it is that the West misreads the fallen empires. So if you look at you try to do an analysis of Iran, an analysis of the Turks, and an analysis of Russia, all these countries have something big in common. actually it's multiple things in common. They're fallen empires and recent fallen empires. Empires that 100 and something years ago controlled enormous pieces of the earth, and the Iranians multiple times throughout history, not a single time. Then we're looking at demographic and financial decline in the current age that we're living in, as in because of poor governance, because of demographics, because of geography, other reasons. Their population is dwindling in size. They're looking at an inversion of the population pyramid in the future, where they're not going to be able to finance an aging population. They're looking at financial problems that stem both from their corruption and lack of education in society. And then he says, now dive into the brain of the leader. The leader says, I'm a falling empire, and I'm losing what little I have left. I'm going to make a last-ditch stand to regain what I deserve as an empire, so I am not the leader that signs the death certificate for this empire. And when you go into the brain of those leaders in that sense, their behavior makes much more sense to us Westerners. And we look at it, and Erdogan looks at the world, and he's like, I'm trying to bring back something we've lost. And it's not just lip service to something, to get people excited.
He really believes in it.
But it also has a logical explanation to it. It's not just like political aspirations. He looks at like the shortcomings that his country faces. And again, if you dive into this, you see, and you probably know, you could explain this a lot better than I can. You look at the outcomes of the corruption that they've had within their government, failed, political and financial incentive plans and stuff like that. And every time, and this is me as an Israeli looking at this, every time there's an outcry within Turkish population against policies of the government and corruption rings, etc., what do? They turn up the gas burners on everything related to external issues. Indeed. And Israel is one of those. And in the past, I've looked at it that way. Oh, he attacks Shimon Peres back in Davos. He attacks him because he's at home. He's, everyone's ringing the bells of let's get rid of this government. Now it seems like it's more than that. It seems like they're playing a different game this time around.
What you're saying in the political science, we say rallying people around the flag. Okay, yeah. You have an internal problem, a domestic problem, but you are diverting the attention to an external actor. Mm-hmm. And in the Turkish in the Turkish case, we are seeing it, in a very frequent manner, not only vis-a-vis the state of Israel, but vis-a-vis Israel, Greece, and Armenia, the nation states of the three important minority groups of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, and also of the Republic of Turkey, because more or less many Turks, they know a Jew, a Greek, an Armenian, and they see when their state is slapping those states with their statements or by their actions. For instance, what we have seen in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020, that Azerbaijan regained its lost territories from Armenia, or Turkey, converted Hagia Sophia, the museum that once upon a time was a church, right? It was a cathedral, the biggest cathedral of the Orthodox Christians.
Eastern Church,
Yes, then the Ottomans conquered the city of Constantinople, turned it into a mosque. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder Republic of Turkey, he turned it into a museum. And then Erdogan came and turned it into a mosque. That was a victory, again, a kind of a sweet victory against the Greeks. And when we are coming to Israel, because of the geographical distance, we are, a little far away from them, but now they are approaching. So this is the problem. And until today, we always witnessed that this friction between the two countries was always in a rhetorical manner. Or Turkish, let's say, or Turkey's, foreign policy was designed in a way that they became a part of the South Africa's lawsuit, for instance, in the Hague. Yeah. Okay, so they turned into the champions of delegitimizing the state of Israel. Long story short, we are always witnessing that the Turkish foreign policy is used for public relation purposes, as you said. And now in Turkey, we have another drama. The mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, who was considered as a very important charismatic leader that could challenge Erdogan at the ballot box, he found himself in the prison. I used this metaphor for the first time in 2020, and all of a sudden it became a very popular now in Turkey. I don't think that it's because of me, but it's because of the social media. But still, I wanted to use it once again. In my opinion, Turkish politics was, or is, let me say, the game Monopoly. We all play the game. And in Monopoly, there is a box there, prison. Every player
has to visit prison.
Also, Erdogan was in prison. Yeah. Also, now his adversary İmamoğlu is in prison, unfortunately. But according to the latest news, the Kurdish politician Selahattin Demirtas, who was imprisoned right after the failed coup attempt in 2016, is soon to be released, because you cannot put all of the players inside the prison. You have to free someone from there. So it's kind of a very funny game. It's not funny because...
I love the analogy.
Yeah, it's not funny because at the end, these are people's lives, and unfortunately they are still in the prison cell. And I think that was a political assassination, nothing less. I really don't believe these accusations that he's a corrupt politician and these kind of things, because at the end he's on his rise and he's going there. The night before he was arrested, his BA diploma, bachelor's degree,
was challenged or something like that.
Not
right?
challenged, was cancelled by his own university, as if he did not earn it in a proper way.
Because it's criteria to run for...
Yeah, criteria according to the Turkish constitution. If you have a bachelor degrees, you can run for the presidential elections, and if you don't, so you cannot. So in the beginning, I thought that this would be limited only with that. By the way, it's really ridiculous, because the Turkish High Education Council had to take the decision, and instead a sub-council of Istanbul University took this ridiculous decision. They do not have any jurisdictional power to take such a decision. Okay, so this is something very lawless. This is illegal, what they are doing. But still, they are giving us the impression that the rule of law in Turkey, unfortunately, is fading away, because you're seeing all of these arbitrary moves that they are trying to get rid of you with these kind of silly maneuvers. I'm calling it silly. You're calling it silly. The law tags it as silly and not acceptable, but they are still doing it as if it is legal. And this is the problem that we are seeing in Turkey, that country is losing its path from the rule of law. Okay, this is the most important problem. The people are losing their faith in the system, in the justice system, and their belief at the ballot box, in the ballot box, that they can change the government through the ballot box. Turkey was never a democracy like Scandinavia, okay, was never Finland, Sweden, etc., or Central Europe. But still, we could speak about stations, okay, like elections were considered as stations. From station to the next station, maybe the whole process, maybe the whole interval was not very democratic, but you had a hope that in the next station, the government will be held accountable and you could change the government. With this move that İmamoğlu was taken into prison, now you have no grounds to have that hope. So this is the most important problem of Turkish democracy now.
Maybe another way to look at all of this, I think you're telling a very, very interesting story, is the fact that the level of internal stability that exists in the country is tied to how volatile their foreign policies are. And I'll explain, like, from my limited understanding of Turkish history, you look at it, President Erdogan himself, you talk about his prison time. He's a member of a party that leans heavily onto the Islamic side of affairs. And Turkey, since the times of Atatürk, sort of the founder of the modern nation, has been on this tenuous relationship, by the way, which isn't exclusive to Turkey as a Muslim country, between secularism and often military governance. And then the flip side, or the swing side of that, is an extreme Islamic and more radical mindset. And oftentimes you'll see the institutions of the countries battle between them. You see that in Egypt, even during the Arab Spring, and of course back in the early days of let's call it the multiple waves of revolution that hit it in the 40s and 50s. But then Turkey's the same thing. They're now in a tenuous relationship internally, where the government is sort of stretched thin as far as the control of the people. I remember this has happened several times. They had, what was the earthquake? Was the end of 2023?
It was 6th of February, 2023.
23, okay.
Yes.
So, and you look at that, and I remember, it was really interesting to me. You saw these widespread waves of demonstrations within Turkey because some of the disasters had to do with corruption and the way things were constructed.
Yes.
The same thing happened when I was a child. And do you remember?
99.
Was it 99? So I was I think in the beginning of high school back then, and I remember the imagery from that of the exact same thing. Public sort of projects, both buildings and other facilities that were built in a lawless way by corrupt contractors that were related to the government. They collapsed in an earthquake of a low magnitude, not a substantial earthquake.
No, 7.2 also.
But they shouldn't have collapsed to the same degree.
I assume that, given the devastation, I agree with you that they had to survive. Anyway, my building, thank God, survived. Otherwise, I couldn't. But for instance, my cousin's building did not survive, and unfortunately, we lost them.
So my point was that I remember there being a lot of. First of all, I'm sorry to hear, and I remember even this is many years ago. I remember the demonstrations internally of people saying this is because of government corruption, and I look at that, and I'm just making this connection by everything you're describing. That a country like that has a problem with corruption, who it tries to implement social, religious, financial reforms, all of them sort of at the same time, and they don't succeed. And Turkey's had a whole lot of them that have failed relatively on a large scale. What do? You or switch the government, and if you're not in the mindset of being switched during the elections, you start externally trying to validate your governance. And that's what they're doing. And we're looking at this player that becomes more and more extreme in their behavior. And just to frame the conversation here, in the last 20 years, Turkey has done things in relation to Israel that no other country that isn't a direct adversary has dared to do. One, if you talk about military presence right now in the Middle East specifically. Two, when it comes to public relations, President Erdogan has said some extreme things over the years that are common for people that you're at war with, not someone that you're trading with on a large scale. Talk about the Mavi Marmara. They sent a ship full of terrorists and weapons towards the Gaza Strip, who violently attacked the IDF soldiers who tried to stop them. It's this very bizarre relationship. And one, I'm interested to hear two things. One, is this related to the person that's at the head of the state? Or two, does he represent a very large population in Turkey that feels the same way and he's acting on their behalf?
Well, my short answer is yes and yes. Okay. So first, Erdogan, he raised and grew up in a very Islamist environment. Yeah. And he is considered as a student of the great anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist former prime minister of Turkey, Necmettin Erbakan. Okay, so he grew up.
I'm afraid to say I've never heard of him.
Ah, yeah? Okay, so...
I apologize.
No, you're not apologize. I apologize that I mentioned his name in Jerusalem, but still. What I would like to tell is it's not surprising me at all when we keep saying education. Yes, he educated in this kind of an environment. And you cannot expect from such a person to have anti-Israel, anti-Zionist tendencies. From their perspective, Zionism is a kind of a swear word. Yeah. Okay? So, but compared to his other associates in the party, he is very, very pragmatic. And since he has this charisma, he is capable of doing lots of U-turns in his political life, and nobody can challenge him on that. And therefore, we witnessed two different normalizations with Turkey in 2016, and also another one that was launched in 2023 by President Herzog, right? They posed two cameras next to Israeli flags and, of course, Turkish flags at the presidential palace. Long story short, then he believed that it was in Turkey's interests because he what he did was he normalized his relationship not only with Israel, but also with the United Arab Emirates, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt. Then, until that particular U-turn, Turkey then was living in its own policy doctrine called the precious loneliness. They imposed on themselves loneliness. They isolated themselves in the name of their own political ideology. Until when? Until they saw the success of Abraham Accords. They understood that everyone is going to eat this tasty pie.
And they were being left out of the game.
Yes.
Interesting.
So therefore, they decided to mend their fences not only with Israel, but with all countries of the Middle East. Until when? October the 7th. October the 7th, when they fully understood that Israel is going to eradicate Hamas. And this is not a limited skirmish. So they decided to change their foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel in a radical manner. And now we are witnessing that. Yes, of course, for the negative.
I mean, in an extreme way.
It's extreme way. And within 2 weeks, we begin to see a very harsh rhetoric against Israel, not only delegitimizing Israel, but we also began to see they baptized Hamas as a freedom organization. These called murderers, rapists, they turned into saints, that they are so-called trying to protect their own homeland from the occupiers, etc. This is unbelievable.
At the same time, they also denied any plan to accept any of Hamas leadership or anything like that into Turkey. So a little on the hypocritical side over there.
Hypocritical because of the United States, because they know that if they would turn Turkey into Hamas headquarters, they would be in a very problematic situation vis-a-vis the West. But what they are doing, they are safeguarding their relationship with the Hamas terrorist organization under the pretext of this latest ceasefire. Let me remind you, Turkey is now hosting Hamas terrorists who were freed from the Israeli prison because of this deal. Yeah. So when you're going to ask them, why are you having this intimate relationship with Hamas? They say, but you asked us to receive these terrorists. We only wanted to facilitate the deal so that you could have your own hostages. So they would come to you with lots of counter arguments to challenge you. This is ridiculous. But we all know that also even before the current deal, they hosted the Hamas officials.
Yeah. They've done so for decades at this point. Yeah.
Also, in the Gilad Shalit deal, we again witnessed that the Turks received Hamas terrorists. Unfortunately, this is a tactical mistake that it is carried out by Israel. That with our own hands, we are creating a new leadership in Turkey, and since Turkey is considered as a friendly country on paper, the Israeli Mossad...
You can't act there and take care of them. Yeah,
definitely.
You're the second person to say that this week that I've spoken to.
Yeah.
That it's a huge mistake that we export the terrorists out of our watchful eye.
Indeed.
We should leave them where we can actually control what they do versus...
Send them to Gaza.
Yeah.
Send them to, Judea and Samaria. Yeah. Send them to any other hostile nation so that we can have it done. But when you're sending it to Turkey, so they are using Turkey as a shield. They are immune from Israeli reach.
Turkey's big enough for us not to be hasteful in the way we take action within their boundaries. They're a big and powerful country, and you need to be careful.
Besides that, you should respect the sovereignty of the other state. But in case of Turkey, I mean, this is very unacceptable that they are hosting these bloodthirsty terrorists and they are looking in your eyes and you can do nothing.
So where are we going with all of this? It's been a depressing conversation so far.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I took this as a compliment.
It is. It proves to your power in telling a story. But in all seriousness, so I'm looking back at this last war season that we've had with the Turkish government, and the Turkish government has gone has gone to great lengths to try to hurt Israel, even in ways that are ineffective. And I'm just trying to think, run my head through. They wanted to prevent the sale of goods from Turkey to Israel. They called for diplomatic action. They took action in the International Criminal Court. It's 100 different small things, all to try and sabotage Israel, all to side with Hamas, all to ideologically align with those who murdered the innocent on October 7th. Where are we going from here? Now they're next door in Syria, and we understand, yes, there are sort of contributing factors that relate to the Kurds and the vacuum of power with the Americans, the Russians, and all that jazz. And yet here we are with a country that, from what I can tell, is led by a man who is, in a unhealthy way, negatively obsessed with Israel. I mean, he's for now it's many, many years, constantly spoken in a very hateful manner about Israel, called for policies against our country. Where are we going from here? One, is he going to be in leadership long because there have been demonstrations there? Two, is there another level of escalation we can expect against the Turkish government?
I wish I had a crystal ball and could foresee the future. But we are marching towards, I think, to a controlled... I really wish that we should put our emphasis on the word controlled friction. From time to time, we will definitely see a kind of a friction inside Syria. We may see Turkish military activity within the boundaries of Syria, and we may see a kind of a friction with the IDF. And not only in the skies of Syria, this may also be applicable for the Eastern Mediterranean. And in the Eastern Mediterranean, I would like to remind you that Turkey has a very complex, very well-equipped navy. So, in my opinion, as an Israeli, I could criticize my own government on this issue, that even if Israel is behaving like an island state in terms of importing, exporting, we are not, correct me if I'm wrong, but are we importing any important goods from Egypt, from Jordan? Of course, not from Syria and Lebanon. No. Right, we are receiving
substantial.
We are
fruit and vegetables for the most part.
But still, can we survive without
easily?
them? Easily, yeah. It means that the vast majority of the things that we are bringing to this country are from outside. It means that we are behaving like an island.
Well, that's what it's called, an island economy.
Yeah, island economy.
Island
so,
economy.
What is the definition of an island? That island is a piece of land that it is surrounded by water, right? So, as an island country, is your navy strong enough? Let me tell you, thank God our air forces is very strong, but our navy, which is providing you continuous presence in certain areas, is not as strong as our air forces. So, in my opinion, it's not only against Turkey, but again, I'm highlighting that we are an island country, okay, even if not island, but an island country, that we have to strengthen our navy immediately, right? So, in the bigger picture, we may see friction in Syria in the airspace. I think with this latest strategy that our government, the Israeli government, is implementing in southern Syria with the Druze community, I think this is very valuable. This is very crucial, that we should not allow any Turkish presence in our border with Syria. This would be, a huge mistake. We should do everything in order not to allow it. Not only, Turkish forces, but even I don't want to see any Turkish forces within a framework of a peacekeeping force. Even that.
Well, I hope we've learned the lesson on the peacekeeping force side of things. To frame this in a visual sense for our viewers, I don't remember when this was. A couple months ago, Tomer, our director, and I were in Lebanon with IDF, and you drive by. I'm saying this because people need to understand how ineffective this is. And why Israel has a stakehold in Syria now, physically, and also in Lebanon, and we're going to do the same in the Gaza Strip. We drive by a UN outpost, and within eyesight of it is a labyrinth of caves that were dug by Hezbollah. and when I say labyrinth, I mean there was an underground city, and it's literally like you could be sitting where we're sitting, and you look up to the hill next to it, and there's like a cave system built, or tunnel, I guess, a system built by Hezbollah.
But
And
they didn't hear anything,
they knew
right?
nothing, and they knew nothing. And you look at it, it's like, you got to be kidding. You could hear the sounds of the digging,
Of course.
and see the dust of it from where we're standing right here. And so we look at that, and you really, I think we've had a switch in our head as Israelis. You can't rely on international forces to safeguard our borders. That's not happening.
I think this is our mistake, that we relied on other foreign forces to secure our own national security. We also have seen this during the Second World War, that the foreign powers did not protect the Jews.
Yeah.
So that's why we are standing here today
Not
in
just
Jerusalem.
They didn't protect their allies with which they had treaties, and then I think many countries have a fallacy where we sign treaties and imagine that someone is going to act strongly against their best interest at the moment because 10 years, 15, 20 years ago they signed a piece of paper. Peace is kept by strong parties, not by weak people expecting other people to safeguard
I agree
them.
with you, but again, I will make this comment from a Jewish perspective.
Mm-hmm.
As the people who experienced the Holocaust, we cannot rely on any other foreign power, but we have to only rely on our Jewish state of Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we should, of course, respect our American friends. We have to strengthen our relationship with the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But let me tell you very frankly, we cannot count on the United States for everything. So that's why we are a sovereign state, and we should protect this state as we protect our own eyes.
Yeah. I think we've done a good job of it in recent months, and maybe a little less than that if you look farther back. Anyway, so I think we're wrapping up here. I'm going to say this has been very, very interesting in the sense that this is like many of these conversations where you just can't understand current day events by current day information. You have to go back, sometimes in the case of Turkey, 100+ years to really understand the mindset that they have as a country. You have to look at their geopolitics, you have to look at their economy, you have to look at like the trends that they're living with in their society, the political pressures internally, and only then can you begin to have an educated conversation about what it is that tomorrow is going to look like with this country. And Turkey's an extreme version of that. They're unpredictable. They're extreme in their behavior. They're very bold when it comes to their foreign policy, both towards Europe, the U.S., and Israel.
You know why? Because it's not an artificial country. It's a successor state of an empire which had a tremendous state tradition, and they are here to stay. And let me tell to our viewers that also Israel is here to stay.
I'm on board with that 100%.
Perfect.
That's our plan. Thank you, Chai.
Thank you very much for having me on this distinguished platform. Thank you.
Hello, this is Matti here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.